I was pretty tired and ready for bed at the hotel when my boss called and asked me to come back to the office by 8 a.m. I had to book a flight and get to the airport. It was too late to call my wife without waking the kids, so I asked the taxi to drop me off at home. I sneaked inside and noticed the house was dark except for our bedroom light, where I heard my wife and a man talking. My kids were probably with relatives. I realized my wife was having an affair. I felt sick remembering my grandparents' advice to stay calm. I took deep breaths. I have a bad temper. My grandfather warned me about the potential to ruin my life, so I decided not to seek revenge, but to gather evidence. I used my new smartphone, which had a clear camera and microphone and a modified flash drive to prevent battery drain, to record my wife cheating. It crushed my pride, but I decided to get a DNA test for the kids. I overheard something that made me lose control. I lost control. I rushed into the room, fought the man, and drove him out. My wife, Sheila, hid in a corner, terrified. I commanded, "Come here." I was stunned, like watching a movie unfold each time the beast took over. I remembered almost nothing afterwards. This had only happened 4 times in my life. I repeated, "Come here." She crawled to the corner of the bed near me. "I'm so sorry, Steve." "I'm so sorry, Steve," she pleaded. "I will shut up the beast," he growled. I asked, probing for more of her deceit. Sheila shuddered. I wondered how long she'd been deceiving me and how many people she'd deceived. She was wide-eyed with horror. "Please, I'm so sorry. Don't hurt me." "I'm so sorry," she begged. "You're a cheating cow. You've desecrated this house, this bedroom, and this bed. You've betrayed your husband and your children." I let the beast rage. She looked even worse. Her eyes were wide, and her teeth were chattering. The beast was shocked. I patted him on the back. It felt like he was patting me back, as if he'd always protect me. "You will pack your things and leave by noon. Take all the bedroom furniture, especially this bed. Leave my things neatly on the floor. Understand?" I demanded. "How will I do all this?" she asked. Her voice was shaking. "I don't care. Maybe ask your crazy brothers." I lent money to by noon. The beast, he roared through me. "Yes, by noon," she whispered, defeated. Sheila shook and covered her head. The beast took control, grabbed my bags, and headed to the car. I noticed Mark was gone. The beast tossed my bags into the trunk and put me in the driver's seat. I saw in the mirror that my nose was broken, ruining my looks. I drove to the hospital. The doctors found I had a broken nose, 2 broken ribs, a possible concussion, and several. They wanted to admit me to hospital, but I refused since I had to be at work in 2 hours. The police were called, and I told them I was the sufferer, but couldn't remember much. I insisted I was seriously injured and the other party was fine. Since I didn't see Mark in the emergency room, they tested me and I was clean as a whistle. I explained I was urgently called back to work. Given the state of the economy, they didn't want to damage a big employer without cause. They trusted me, so I left work. I went to my boss's office. Audrey Hammer, the VP, had a full bathroom. I showered and went to bed, still not feeling any pain. I arrived at the office and saw Steve's car. He was our best troubleshooter. He was underpaid and undervalued. I wanted to change that, but it meant dealing with my older brothers, who co-owned the company. Steve wasn't at his desk, so I went to my office to find him. I found his luggage and him asleep on my couch. He looked like he could be on the cover of GQ. He's one of the most handsome men I know. Unlike me, he's prematurely gray and looks older than his age. Steve is oblivious to his charm. I approached the sofa and gasped. His face was bruised purple and Steve was black and had a metal splint on his nose. I touched his shoulder and his eyes opened. He looked scary at first, but then he looked gentle as usual. "Steve, what happened to you?" I asked. "I called Heather in the morning." "Heather, I need your help. I have a friend who needs a divorce lawyer. Can you see him this morning? Thanks. See you soon. But I want to know everything that happened, Audrey. Steve was the best assistant I could hope for, making this job bearable. Audrey and I worked for an hour to fix my brother's mess. The company would be twice as successful without them. Heather arrived and I told my story, leaving out details about the beast. I said I blacked out with rage and showed them the video. Mark asked Sheila, "Am I more important than your children?" Sheila replied, "I'm yours. I don't care about them." Heather and Audrey were shocked. Heather growled, "I want full custody of my kids, even if it means sacrificing our assets. I don't want to pay child support. My kids are with her parents, and I want to pick them up. This evidence makes it tough to get full custody. Your wife might claim she spoke in the heat of the moment. I'll draft preliminary documents, give my card to your wife, and have her lawyer contact me. Stay calm and avoid more mistakes. Understand." Heather looked serious. "I'm sorry, Heather, I lost control. I'll stay calm. Thanks for representing me, Audrey." She says you're the Steve said that Audrey and Heather had a quick word in private before Heather left. I'd been working with Steve for a couple of hours when I suddenly got really nervous. I realized the beast was anxious about Sheila leaving my house by noon. I wanted to let her stay, but Steve had other plans and seemed out of control. Oh no, Audrey. I have a personal. It should only take an hour or two to sort it out. I'm sorry, but can I leave? I'll be back as soon as I can. Steve said it was fine. Steve, you've been a great help. Just come back quickly. There were also police cars and 3 officers there. I grabbed my laptop and went over to the police officers. I said, "I've got a recording for you about last night. Can I show you?" "Yes, I'm Steve Blaine, Sheila's husband," the police sergeant replied. "I'll answer all your questions. Please watch this recording." They seemed ready to cuff me, but the sergeant had kind eyes, even though she seemed tough. "Okay, Mr. Blaine, we'll watch it, but stay where you are," she said. "I promise you, Sergeant." I started the recording and turned up the volume. Some neighbors watched too, when Sheila's voice said, "I don't give a damn about them." Sheila dropped the box she was carrying. We all looked. As she picked up her things, I noticed a bag of white powder fall out of the box. I saw something suspicious, so I called the sergeant. She saw it too and ran towards Sheila, calling for backup. I remembered a scene in the recording and zoomed in on a small mirror with white powder streaks on the bedside table. I showed this to an officer, who called the sergeant. Then she handcuffed Sheila, who was crying and sobbing. Sheila's brothers watched in shock as the sergeant ordered them to finish their work. 2 officers took Sheila away. "Sergeant, what just happened?" I asked. "Your wife was arrested for possession of prohibited substances. It's powder. We'll test it to confirm." "What about my children?" I asked when I could see my kids. "Where are they?" She said, sounding concerned. "They're probably at my wife's parents' house, about 5 miles from here." I was worried that the sergeant's worried look cleared and she seemed relieved. "I'll stay here until they finish and then follow you to your relatives. There will be no violence, but I need a full statement of your injuries." "Okay." I came home to find my wife with Mark Grossberg. I recorded it for proof when my wife said something about our kids. I blacked out. Before I knew it, I was telling her to leave by noon. I went to the hospital after that. I'm not sure how I got injured or if I hurt Mark. I showed her my hospital documents listing my injuries. She asked, "Does anything hurt?" I said, "No, I know the pain will start eventually and I'm not looking forward to it." I replied, feeling a bit dizzy, that I had beautiful eyes. "Maybe I should take you to the hospital," she suggested. "I'm just tired and only slept for 2 hours. I need to pick up my kids and get back to work. We have a daycare at work, so it'll be fine." I explained, "Okay, but I'll take you to your wife's parents." She said, "Whatever you say." My soon-to-be my brothers-in-law were finally done, so I locked the house and got into the patrol car. On the drive, the sergeant offered some advice. She said that if she were me, she'd get temporary custody and a restraining order against my wife. This would prevent her from entering the family home or seeing the kids right now, while she's in jail. I told her I had control and that I'd use this time wisely. She advised me to do the same. I said I'd called Heather, explained the situation, and shared the sergeant's advice. She assured me she'd handle everything by 11. The next day, I started calling the sergeant by her first name, Rosemary, and even flirted a bit. She gave me some strange but not hostile looks. "Aren't you happy for someone in this situation?" she asked. "I'm going to pick up my children. I thought I wouldn't see them for weeks. I have good people helping me. Why let my wife's betrayal hurt me? My marriage has already fallen apart, but I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm going to enjoy life and my kids. In other words, I'm going to stop and smell the roses." "Rose," I said, wiggling my eyebrows at her. "I don't know if you're smart, crazy, need a doctor, or maybe I just need sleep." She remarked that there was no confrontation at my mother and Rosemary told them to give us the kids, and we left. They never liked or respected me, and I suspect they knew about Sheila's betrayal. My kids were thrilled to see me and excited to ride in the police car. My oldest, Luke, who is 5, wanted to hear the sirens. Luke's younger brother, who is 3, wanted to ride on Rosemary's lap. Her being called Aunt Rosemary didn't help. She gave me a look that was a mix of disappointment and humor. "Aunt Rosemary, are you going to come to our house?" Hope asked. "I can't, honey. I'm too busy," Rosemary replied. "What shifts do you work?" Hope asked. "I work from 8 to 5 all week," she answered, sounding suspicious. "Then you can come to dinner tomorrow night at 6:30. I hope you can show Aunt Rosemary your doll collection." I suggested that's great. "Steve, you never told me you had a daughter." Rosemary began. "You don't want to upset Hope, do you not now?" I gave her an innocent look. "Okay, what do you want for dinner?" "Chicken." "We'll have chicken. I'm doing this for the kids' sake. You seem a bit off, so I better keep an eye on you." "I bring anything Hope," Rosemary asked. "What should Rosemary bring?" I asked Hope. She said ice cream. Hope said Rosemary stopped in front of my office building to let us out. "I'll bring the ice cream." Rosemary agreed. "Thanks, Aunt Rosemary." Hope said thanks. Luke added, "Goodbye, Rosemary." I said she waved goodbye and drove off. What am I doing? Steve could be a suspect if Grossberg presses. I can't believe I was sent to his house. I've always admired Steve Blaine. I thought I'd have to arrest him. I remember the first time I saw him with his kids in the park 2 years ago. He made my knees weak with his appearance, mannerisms, voice, and movement. He should be a model. More women showed up at the park when he was there. We even chatted sometimes. I saw him last weekend and he did me a big favor. I was taking pictures of landscapes, which included Steve, and then I was called to arrest him. Thankfully, things turned out differently. He told me I had the most beautiful eyes and flirted with me. I guess he hasn't slept with anyone for a long time. I must be one of the ugliest women on the planet. I have the shape of I don't know how I'm going to face him after that. I'm pretty sure he'll still be gorgeous, but I don't know if I can sit across from him with his usual face. I wanted to scream like a girl meeting a pop idol. I'm going to have to calm down, Rosemary. His kids called me Aunt Rosemary. You need to visit Mark Grossberg and get a statement. I dropped my kids off at daycare. I also went to see Audrey. I felt a bit odd, maybe because I haven't slept much recently or because of the beast, but I felt more persistent and flirted with Rosemary. I should be grieving my marriage, but it feels like it ended a long time ago. Something was blocking my pain, and I hoped it would last. Audrey and I finished our work that day. Audrey, I think I'll be exhausted tomorrow. Can I take a day off? I'll call you, but you can stay home. I'm sorry about your situation. Good night, Audrey. My broken ribs worried me the most since they could limit my mobility, and I needed to take care of my kids. We took a taxi home, and I ordered pizza for dinner. Hope and Luke asked about their mom. I explained that Mom and Dad had a big fight, but we both still loved them very much. After the fight, it was decided that Mom would stay at their grandparents' house. "It's okay, Daddy, as long as you stay with us. We're tired of staying at our grandparents' house." Both kids hugged me tightly. I realized they spent many nights with their grandparents, likely when Sheila was cheating. That night, I found an emergency nanny service and arranged for someone to come at 7 midnight morning. I put the key under the door, thinking that my lack of sleep and pain might make it hard to get up. I transferred most of our savings from joint accounts to my own current account and canceled our joint credit cards. I thought about emptying our safe deposit box, since I had the only key, but decided to think about it. We all slept in the guest bedroom's double bed, so I wouldn't have to run down the hall if the kids woke up this morning. Luke and Hope woke me up. "Dad, someone is ringing at the door just then." My phone rang. "Hi, Mr. Blaine, it's Gloria from the nanny service. I just wanted to check in and see if you're home. I'm a bit tired, so I'll keep this short. Thanks for coming. I'm sorry I'm a bit tired, but I'd really appreciate it if you could come in and go upstairs." I heard the front door open and footsteps, and it seemed like the woman who came in was in her late 50s. I explained the situation, and she needed to get Hope ready and take her to daycare, then look after Luke for the rest of the evening. She got to work quickly and was very warm towards the children. "I'm going to rest for the day now. I'll let you know if there's anything else. Thanks again." The divorce papers arrived. Heather called to say that my wife had been served with them while she was in jail. She expected Sheila to be released that evening, between the controlled substance charge and the record. I now had a great chance of getting full custody while Gloria went to pick up Hope from daycare. I stopped by the bank, bought a new safe deposit box, and moved most of the contents from the old one to the new one. I left Sheila's things in the old box I opened a new current account and savings account in my name only. I then transferred money from my old account to the new one. Once the divorce is settled, I wouldn't mind Sheila getting half, but I don't want her to waste money on things like illegal substances or bail. I felt amazingly good, although I finally felt pain. It wasn't as bad as I feared. My knees hurt the most. I decided to buy some chicken from the grocery store and cook it tonight. Gloria left at 5. I thought I'd play it safe and ask her to come by tomorrow. Rosemary arrived quickly, and we had a wonderful dinner. Hope asked to see Rosemary's weapon, and Rosemary carefully explained how dangerous real weapons were. I must have looked terrible to Rosemary because she kept asking about my condition. I was pretty bad, so I decided to get all the attention I could from Rosemary. She agreed to sit with us and watch a movie. I suggested we watch a children's movie, then I asked her to buy some for us to watch together. I then pretended to be feeling dizzy and asked her to sit with me during another movie. I said that I would be more comfortable if she stayed while I was feeling dizzy, just in case. Oh my God, I'm sweating. I've always wondered what the hell is sweat. During the second film, she told me how she interrogated Mark Grossberg. She promised not to tell anyone what she said. She found Mark living in a hotel in a nearby town. He was terrified of me. He said I forced him into the bathroom and attacked him without warning. Rosemary then showed him the film and the part where he apparently throws himself off the bed towards me and the camera. She then listed all my injuries and compared them to his cuts. She told him that she would be happy to press charges against me, but warned him that I might reciprocate. She said that if I had done this, he could very well have served time in prison. Mark decided not to press charges. I told her that since I didn't really remember what happened, I wouldn't press charges, although I would have to remember to send Mark's wife a copy of my film. Rosemary left at 11. I went back to bed with the kids as time passed. I told Sheila to stop contacting me. I made her speak to my lawyer. My ribs healed in a little over 3 weeks, but my nose still hurt. I redecorated my bedroom with new paint, crown molding, and new curtains. I was finally able to buy a bedroom set I liked. It was a massive 4-poster bed with matching furniture. Everything was made of heavy, dark wood. I liked it. I tricked Rosemary into spending many evenings at my house. I haven't hit on her. I was planning on doing so, but I had to wait for my nose to heal. That thing was a real pain. Everything was going well at work, though. I had to spend a few nights away from home, but I was able to hire Gloria for that time. Audrey did everything she could to reduce my trips out of town. Finally, the doctor told me that my nose was fine. I pretended to be dizzy again and tricked Rosemary into staying out late during the movie. I went and got each of us a bowl of ice cream when I returned. Instead of sitting in I sat next to her on the sofa, close enough to touch. We ate ice cream while watching a movie. I gave her time to relax, then pulled her closer. She looked at me and asked, "What are you doing today?" The doctor said my nose is completely healed, so I don't have to worry about hurting it. That's why I'm making a pass at you. Is that clear enough? I replied, "Why do you want to kiss me?" I'm ugly. I'm absolutely ugly. She said. I put my finger to her lips to stop her. You're a healthy young woman. I'm a great catch. I've got a great personality, a fantastic voice, and wonderful eyes. I take care of myself and stay in shape. I like you. Can we kiss now? I asked, but she started. I kissed her. We had a great time that night. Unfortunately, the night ended as usual, but she agreed to come over tomorrow. I couldn't believe it. The hottest man in town wanted to see me again. I've only kissed one other guy, who was old, ugly, and drunk. Things were going well with Rosemary. I mentioned that Gloria sometimes took the kids overnight and then asked Rosemary if she was free on Saturday evening. She said yes and wanted to show me her apartment. Rosemary greeted me at the door in a dark blouse and black trousers. Why do women always wear dark colors? I asked myself. I gave her a bouquet of long-stemmed roses and a box of chocolates. She blushed and her eyes lit up. I gave her a kiss. It had been almost 2 months since I'd had sex, and I was eager to get started. I asked, "What did you cook for dinner?" "Lasagna," she replied. "Can you turn it off?" "Yes, please do. Sorry, Rosemary, but I'm just too impatient." It was still edible, though. I ate 2 large pieces of lasagna along with some garlic bread to regain my strength. She ate almost 2 pieces, then it hit me. I was sitting here with a gorgeous undressed man in my kitchen. What a happy day. The lovemaking was better than I could have hoped for. After eating and brushing our teeth, we cuddled on the couch and watched TV. I felt proud. Ugly old Rosemary Hoover Watkins had driven a gorgeous guy crazy. The phone rang. I had to stop for about 15 minutes because my neighbor and friend Beth was screaming in my ear. She said, "Rosemary, are you okay? We're all outside your door, ready to break it down, but we decided to wait since you're a cop." Beth said, "Honey, everything is fine." I pressed against Steve's chest and said, "I have a friend visiting, so sorry if we disturb you tonight." She asked, "Is it that gorgeous guy from yesterday?" I replied, "Yes, indeed it is." Steve leaned over and kissed me outside. I heard laughter, cheers, and whistles. Most of my neighbors were single women, and I made friends with them as a policewoman. I protect I'd keep them awake. I hoped they wouldn't call the police. We made love all night and then fell asleep when Steve woke me. He had already showered, dressed, and looked as handsome as ever. He apologized but needed to pick up his children. I smiled sleepily and said I understood. He kissed me, promising to call, and I knew he would. I was exhausted, but I trusted him to lock the door and went back to sleep. Well, it was a wonderful night with Rosemary. I opened the door, checked my feet, and closed it carefully, making sure it locked. I saw flashes of light around me. Some women, with cameras, were there, clapping and applauding, feeling a bit awkward. I bowed and thanked them, then they all extended their right hands like queens. I walked down the hallway, humming an old Irish tune my grandfather taught me, and heard them sigh behind me. The next few months were pleasant. I didn't spend many nights with Rosemary because of Hope and Luke, but the ones I did were wonderful. However, there were two problems in our relationship. The worst was her emotional distance. We'd make progress, but then she'd retreat behind mental walls. The lovemaking was. The sex was great, but there was a lack of emotional connection. Another issue was her constant dark clothing. She always wore black or dark gray, sometimes with a white blouse, which felt just as somber. I wanted to shake her and scream, dress in happy colors. Stop looking like you're going to a funeral. My divorce was moving forward, and we had a date with the judge. Heather proposed a settlement, but they refused. Despite her warning that they were lucky to get that offer from Heather, I learned my wife's infidelity started about 6 months before I caught her with Mark, my ex. While I was away, a friend of mine, Dan, invited her to a party where he got her drunk and gave her illegal substances, which lowered her inhibitions. This led to a 2-month affair. Sheila had an affair that lasted for about a month. It involved wild parties whenever I was away, as I was afraid I'd find out. Dan handed her over to Mark, and she continued cheating until I caught her. She was convicted for illegal substance use and entered rehab, where she is still undergoing therapy. She had a delusional idea that I'd forgive her or agree to joint custody. She told her story to Heather and offered, despite our lack of intimacy, she was open with her therapist. She slept with Dan and Mark. She didn't take substances when I was home, indicating she knew she needed help but chose not to seek it. Instead, she neglected me and our children, often leaving them with her parents when I was away. My grandparents fought for 4 years to get me out of after my parents died. I worked to improve my health and financial situation so I could gain custody of our children. In contrast, my wife gave our children to her parents so she could have affairs. Her parents never liked me or our children. They thought I was too pretty and not manly enough for their daughter. They were strict with our kids, trying to toughen them up. They assumed beauty meant weakness. They'll never see my children again, and my relatives will no longer benefit from my money. The day of the divorce finally arrived in court. We presented our evidence to the judge, who watched the video and examined both of us. She seemed to think my wife was crazy and granted the divorce under Heather's original terms. This upset Heather, but I was satisfied. My wife got half of our assets and retirement accounts, but not my company pension. I had to pay her half the equity in her house. I got full custody of the children, while Sheila got 2 4-hour supervised visits a month. Neither of us paid child support. I also had to keep her on my health insurance for 5 years. Unless she remarried, I deducted the loans I gave to her family from her half of the assets, leaving her with about $350. She also had to pay her own lawyer and her share of legal fees. Heather didn't charge me for her services, saying she owed Audrey for all the good things she'd done for her and knew I had supported Audrey for years. Mark Grossberg left the state and his wife filed for divorce. Dan, my friend, moved across town and changed offices when he saw me. He avoids me shortly after the divorce. Rosemary left me wanting to remain friends, but not see a romantic future. I was sad, but I noticed she always held back emotionally. A couple of weeks later, she told me she met a local FBI agent. I wished her well, but we still met for lunches. A month or so after Rosemary and I separated, I was putting the kids to bed when I heard strange noises at the front door. I thought it was a lost dog at first, but it was Sheila. She was leaning against the screen door, crying and scratching it with one hand. She had no coat or shoes on, and it was around 1 a.m. In the morning, I carefully opened the screen door and carried her inside. She was unresponsive, so I hoped it wasn't due to illegal substances. Instead of calling the police, I decided she needed warmth. I ran a hot bath, undressed her, and put her in it, remembering her preferred temperature. She used to love soaking in the bath. I spent a few hours there with her, setting up the swing-arm LCD TV with one of her old DVDs, I Love Lucy, which she used to watch when she was feeling down. I made her a strawberry smoothie and brought her a bottle of water when I returned. I gave her a straw and told her to drink. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, so I made her a sandwich and chips. She ate a grilled cheese sandwich and chips, drank the smoothie, but didn't say a word. She stayed in the bath for almost 2 hours, probably fearing I would throw her out. Finally, I brought her one of my robes. I told her to stand and put on a bathrobe, then carried her to the guest bedroom and laid her on I put her on the bed and brought her more Lucy DVDs and another bottle of water, telling her to relax and watch some shows. We'll talk in the morning. It was good that tomorrow was Saturday. I took her clothes to the laundromat and washed them. Then I fell asleep wondering what was going on. I decided to have the kids wake up Sheila at 9. I took them to her room and told them I had a surprise. They were really excited to see their mother. Hope was standing by the bed while Luke climbed on top of her. Sheila woke up to their cries of "Mommy, Mommy." She held them close and showed them love as if she hadn't seen them in years. Despite recent supervised visits, they kissed, hugged, and tickled each other. It was sweet, but I couldn't forget her. Eventually, they calmed down and Sheila offered to cook them breakfast. They were really keen and she looked at me for permission. I nodded and decided to give her more time with the kids, knowing they would soon want to watch TV or play a game. When they did, I sat down with Sheila at the kitchen table to talk. I said, "Sheila, you can't stay here forever. I need to know what's going on. Family never liked you. They thought you were too soft. If they'd seen you that night with Mark, they'd have been terrified. They always mocked us, assuming you were cheating because of all your business travel. I know that's not true, but I started to believe it that night. Dan seduced me into a life of pills and lovemaking. I lost sight of being a good mother and wife. My therapist is still helping me. They've been helping me understand how I got here, but I don't think you care. At my parents' house, they took advantage of me, giving me all the heavy work and convincing me to lend them money just 2 days ago. I found out my father was writing checks from my account and gave my car to my brother without my knowledge. I feel like an idiot for trusting them and betraying you first. We'll go to the bank, then file a police report. You don't have to press charges, but it might make them think about returning your property, Steve. Sheila, you listened to them and now you're in trouble. You're the mother of my children, so listen to me now. Okay, we got in the car and went to the bank. Luckily, Sheila found an old pair of dirty garden shoes, otherwise she would have been barefoot. She still didn't remember losing her shoes, having simply run away from her parents' house at the bank. We discovered her father had stolen almost $100. We then went to the police station and I asked to speak with Detective Rosemary Watkins. She was surprised to see me with Sheila, but we explained the situation and she promised to look into it. Sheila's parents started calling me in a panic, but Sheila refused to talk to them. I was fine with that. All of Sheila's property was returned, including her car. They also had to pay back $25,000 immediately and sign a loan document for the remaining $75. Sheila wanted to get out from under the debt, which was over $250,000 at 12% interest, using her home as collateral. After that, she wanted nothing more to do with her parents or brothers. Steve, thank you for your help. I'm glad to see the mother of my children in a better place. Steve, I hurt you badly and still need therapy, but can I stay in the guest room to reconnect with my family? Sheila, I have an offer for you, but you might not want it. You caused me severe emotional trauma. If you stay, you must help around the house and take care of the children. I'll set strict rules to rebuild trust. Think it over. I suggested that Sheila think it over and discuss it with her therapist, Steve. I really regret what I did, Sheila. I can't trust you anymore. One more thing, if you accept the house, it'll be under video surveillance, which will be hard for you, so don't accept it lightly. Sheila accepted, but her therapist was against it. We agreed that she would continue therapy. I set up a separate room for her and established strict rules. She went back on birth control and bought clothes of my choosing. I paid her a salary for housework and childcare, which the kids liked. I reconnected with Sheila without getting emotionally attached and kept strict limits. I told Audrey about my situation with Sheila. Audrey wasn't worried about Sheila, but she was worried that my chaotic life would prevent me from finding true love. I told her about a woman I was interested in who was currently unavailable and that I had a plan for the future. Audrey felt relieved that I wasn't trapping myself with Sheila, despite loving Steve. I saw him make some mistakes. Some of his decisions were a bit foolish, but he was more effective when he had a stable relationship. Between Rosemary leaving and Sheila's return, Steve wasn't as competent as usual. He was still better than most, but not at his usual high level. There was a tension in his eyes that was unsettling. Watching Steve is one of my few pleasures, and seeing him with those bruises was tough. The tension in his eyes now seemed even worse, so I should probably stop complaining about his personal life. Hopefully, he'll find happiness with the new woman I'd like to know when my brothers and I inherited the company. Each of us got 25% of the shares, with another 25% sold publicly over the years. I bought back shares, increasing my stake to over 35%, while my brothers owned less than 20%. Steve's job was to secure another 16% of the vote to help me replace my older brother as CEO of Hammer Incorporated. He first secured the employees' 7% vote, as they knew who made the corporation successful. Steve's charm was effective in winning over the women who controlled more than half of the remaining shares. It was a bloodless transition, and my brother retired to the Caribbean. I rewarded Steve with bonus checks and a promotion, though I couldn't make him president. The deserving manager took that role. I invited Steve to dinner at a Hilton restaurant with the best prime rib in town. I told him, "Steve, we did it. You've been wonderful and a great help for many years." As we sipped wine, Steve looked at me with a strange tension, like he was about to jump out of a plane. "Besides the huge bonus check, I'd like you to accept the position of vice president, Audrey. You're doing a great job running the company without interference. I know you'll be a huge success. As for the position, I'm really sorry, but I can't accept it." My stomach cramped and I almost choked on my wine. "But Steve, why?" Maybe he was upset about not being offered the presidency. "As I mentioned, there's a woman who interests me. Our company policies prevent me from pursuing her, so I'll have to quit. He must be interested in another Hammer employee. I can change the rules if necessary. I'm not losing Steve." 2 weeks ago, in anticipation of my future romance, I stopped all physical closeness with Sheila. She pretended to be disappointed, but I think she was relieved. I've also had a complete physical exam and I'm free of all illnesses, so now I feel ready to start the chase. Why is he telling me this? I can't let him go. Why is he holding my hand and looking at me so intently? "Steve, I'm older than you think. I'd really like to dance with you. Please?" So we danced, and I didn't want it to end. After 4 songs, the food on our table was cold. Steve looked at me kindly. "They actually have room service here, but we don't have a room. Please don't. I know it sounds bad, but I've been looking forward to this for a while." He showed me the room key card, then this amazing negotiator kissed me. I'd make him CEO. I followed him to the elevator and we went to the room and made love. "Steve, I love you. Steve, I love you." He confessed his love to me. I've always had a crush on Steve, but was too scared to admit it. I thought I was too old and too ugly, and that Steve was too great. Now Steve tells me he loves me. He is a magnificent, wonderful, kind, and smart man who loves me. I was the essence of his joy on Monday. I called an emergency board meeting with the president. I announced that Steve had resigned. They were shocked and alarmed. The board, which was composed of women, considered meeting Steve the highlight of their visits. I explained. Steve had been involved with an employee romantically and quit to pursue them. Everyone appreciated Steve's honesty and integrity, but agreed the company needed him, so the policy had to change. Steve would be offered my old job. Mary, the new president, looked at me suspiciously. Audrey, you didn't say who Steve is in love with. You two are very close. If he told anyone, it was you, so who is it? The room full of Steve's fans turned and stared at me. I answered quietly. They all screamed, thrilled for me, for 3 minutes. Steve and I had sex whenever we could. He was really into it, but I was determined to take care of him. He said that since catching his wife cheating, he'd become a bit of a wildcat. I needed to keep up. He was my man, and I'd take care of him. We were discussing marriage when the pregnancy test showed a positive result. I told Steve I'd lied about the pills. He was overjoyed and wanted to marry me. I was really happy. We had a small but elegant and expensive wedding at the Hilton with there were 100 guests at the wedding. Hope was the flower girl, Luke was the ring bearer, Heather was my bridesmaid, and Rosemary was Steve's best friend, who was also the judge in Steve's divorce. She joked that she never wanted to see us officially again, but she smiled a lot. I bought the family estate from my brother when he retired, and Steve's entire family, including Sheila, moved in after the wedding. I allowed Sheila to stay because I didn't want Hope and Luke to feel deprived of their mother. Sheila continued working as a maid, nanny, and mother, but with a big pay rise. I still wore the colorful clothes Steve insisted on. I also changed my wardrobe to bright colors, which made me feel more carefree. Sheila's longing looks at Steve were heartbreaking, but he refused to believe she loved him, even though she was 4 months pregnant. I struggled to take care of Steve, and even before showing, I was already falling behind. The tension returned to Steve's eyes, and he wasn't in the best shape. It seemed like it wouldn't take long to upset him. I had a radical idea. I needed a striker, and I had an obvious substitute in the dugout. I was determined to make it work. I spoke to Sheila and came up with the idea of Steve filling in for me while I was busy with pregnancy and childbirth. She was really enthusiastic, which was great, but I warned her that I had to talk to Steve about it first. Steve was really upset that he couldn't control his desires and felt like a failure as a husband. I'd never seen him cry before, but he was crying and I was crying with him. I told him how I felt like such a failure for not being able to take care of my man, and he made me promise that I would. I still love him, but if he took advantage of Sheila, I also made him promise that I would have complete control over his inner beast in the 7th month of my pregnancy. Rosemary came to us in tears over the past year. Rosemary had become a close friend. She collapsed into my arms, who had hurt this tough cop. She didn't want to talk. I told Steve, but she decided to trust me. It turns out her boyfriend was not what he seemed. To her horror, she agreed to some of his wishes before regaining her pride in retaliation. He exposed her behavior to his superiors, ruining her professional reputation. I knew what to do. I called Heather and gave her Rosemary's ex-boyfriend's name. I told Rosemary that I'd been thinking for a while that my company should have a corporate security department. I'd hire her as its new leader and have her create it. That solved 2 problems at once. I liked it. Heather sued this guy for everything he owned or would own for the next 20 years. He was out of there. Rosemary was doing well in her new job, but she was struggling emotionally at home. I encouraged her to move in with us. When she saw Steve for the first time in months, she looked so sad. I asked her why she left him. She said she didn't feel worthy of him. I don't think that's true. 8 months into my pregnancy, Steve hasn't experienced any real love in 3 months. Sure, he had a Steve and I had a physical relationship with Sheila, but it wasn't love. He needed love. I discussed this with Rosemary, who was skeptical and worried it would damage my marriage. I've known Steve for almost years and I trusted him. He was honest and didn't lie. If I thought things were getting out of control, I would tell him to stop, and he would stop. It was that simple. I spoke to Steve and he was even more concerned than Rosemary. It took a lot of persuasion, but I managed to convince him. Can you imagine a wife having to persuade her husband to sleep with someone else? Steve also worried that I might want to sleep with someone else someday. He wasn't going to do this. I told him that would never happen. He is exactly the man I need. I encouraged Steve's wife to change her taste in clothes and her style. She started wearing bright colors and even wore a dress around the house. This made Steve happy, and when Steve is happy, it makes me and everyone else happy. I'm a very happy woman. I thought I would be a childless old maid, but now I have a baby on the way and 2 stepchildren. A year later, Steve was furious. His life was completely out of control. He loved it, but felt guilty about it. Between Audrey and the Beast, it seemed like he had little to say about his personal life. The Beast loved Audrey. He needed someone to talk to and to take back control. Steve's mind was still in turmoil over the change. His heart was opening up to Sheila again, and he was afraid of it because of the Beast. Steve had difficulty getting outside help. So instead of talking to anyone, he decided to write it all down. Well, the Beast had a weakness when Steve was with his kids. The Beast left Steve alone, and he wasn't completely under control. Steve was still struggling to come to terms with the change. He was starting to feel close to Sheila again, but he was scared because of the Beast. It was difficult for him to get outside help, so instead of talking to anyone, Steve decided to write it all down. The Beast had a weakness when Steve was with his kids. The Beast left Steve alone, and he wasn't completely under control. I was going to make the most of this opportunity. I thought with annoyance, I must be the unluckiest psychiatrist in the country. I have 2 meetings today. The guy who called a while ago seemed crazy. I hope I can help him. It was time to get back to earning money. I opened my latest romance novel. My publisher wanted it written in 2 weeks, and I had 30,000 words to write. I had 000 words left. The phone rang, startling me. Janice, my secretary, said my 2 o'clock was here. She seemed a little out of breath. I had to get up from my office chair. The man who entered was carrying a child in his arms, but he was absolutely great. I wanted him to be on the cover of my next novel. I tried to put a professional expression on my face again. Come on, Margaret, wipe the drool off your face and pay attention. Dr. Huff, I'm Steve Blaine, and this is my daughter Victoria. I walked around my desk to get a closer look at the baby. Not many people let me play with their children. He looked down at her with such love and tenderness. This man seemed perfect. Why could he be here? What can I do for you, Mr. Blaine? Please call me Steve. I have an unusual problem. I don't know if I have a split personality or not. I wrote a diary or a story of my life, if you will. It might take you a while to read it, so I'd be grateful if you could charge me for the time. I'd really like to meet you next week. He looked at me with such despair. I'd even give him my kidney if he asked. Steve, it'll be fine. Let's meet at the same time next week. I read Steve's story over the course of a week. I read it at least 5 times and also looked at the photographs. He didn't describe the women in his life as less beautiful in the diary. I looked at one photo that was actually one of those family Christmas cards that people make. I would never have had the chance to take it. It showed Steve sitting with 3 women, 2 children, and 1 infant, probably Victoria. They were sitting on or next to a sofa to his left. Next to Steve was an older woman who looked a bit plain. She was holding Victoria in her arms. To his right was a woman who was clearly pregnant and sitting on the floor. Next to her was a woman in a pink uniform. She was also a bit plain. She was pregnant and had 2 children with her. I couldn't believe this picture. I looked at it for many nights in a row. I hung this photo on the mirror in my bedroom. I looked at her and then at my reflection. I was no uglier than the woman at St. Steve's right. How did she get so lucky? Steve was back again the following week with Victoria from his story. I understood why. Steve. You're talking about the Beast. I know you had a rough time in foster care. The Beast is probably a result of those experiences. The last thing I want to mention is that the Beast woke up, but from what you've told me, it doesn't seem like he wanted to hurt you. He seems to be more of a protector. I don't know if the beast is just a hidden aspect of your personality or if it represents a real schism, but I think you should stop demonizing him and give it a different name. You should respect it. I think you're right. He was my protector, but he was also cruel. I kind of liked it. What name would you suggest giving him? He gave me a smile and I felt my face warm up. What about Bob? It's a friendly name. Who ever heard of a monster named Bob? He closed his eyes for a moment, deep in thought. I think Bob likes his new name. He chuckled. What a wonderful laugh. I'm pretty sure he likes you too. I felt my face turn red at these words. Most of my patients, they wouldn't even look me in the eyes. They found me so repulsive that I didn't have many patients because of my appearance. They had one consultation with me and then found another therapist. Steve never refused to look me in the face. There was never a hint of disgust on his handsome features either. Steve, are you saying that you have a new position? Audrey said that my skills as I don't think a troubleshooter would be a good fit as vice president. I think she hated all those late nights, so I was promoted to board member and I'm also a special assistant to both Audrey and the president. My work week is only 30 hours or less, which I like because it gives me more time to spend with my family. Both Audrey and Mary, the company president, assure me that I am making a valuable contribution. Steve was completely desperate the next week. Audrey wants to bring another woman into our house because she's pregnant again, and Rosemary and Sheila are due to give birth in a couple of months. She's afraid that I won't be taken care of. This nonsense needs to stop. That's not how you do that in polite society in this country. Steve, I understand that you are obsessed. I'd like to speak with Audrey. I think she loves you, Steve, and I'm sure we can come to an understanding. He had a frightened expression on his face. Audrey is the best thing that could happen to me. You can talk to her, but please don't ruin everything for me. I'll do my best. I pulled up to Steve's house. I knew he was out of town, which would give me a chance to talk to Audrey about Steve. She had already agreed to meet with me. I spoke with Audrey for several hours, outlining Steve's concerns. Audrey understood that they were breaking many societal barriers, but now she loved her life. If society didn't like it, they could just shut up. Audrey, I appreciate your attitude, but Steve is a very kind person. He thinks he's taking advantage of you, but I believe you're genuinely happy with the situation. Steve is a very kind person. He thinks he's taking advantage of you. He believes he's cheating on his marriage vows. We'll need to work on Steve to convince him that you're all genuinely happy with the situation. I think it would be better if he had frequent and even daily therapy with someone who was top of their class. I said quietly, and a smirk appeared on Audrey's face. What exactly? Margaret, I can call you that, right? Steve told me you're looking for a new woman. I'd like to apply for that job. I said the last part so quietly that I thought Audrey wouldn't hear, but her grin grew even wider. Merry Christmas from the Blaine family. There were 4 women in the picture with Steve, all beaming. 3 women held children and 1 was pregnant. The 4th woman didn't have a child, but she was clearly pregnant too, and her smile was the biggest of them all. Audrey, yes, Steve. Judge Grant from our wedding has been appearing often lately. Are we in some trouble?